Hello, 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 hello. How's everybody doing? Okay, just about. Hi, my name's Lovelda Vincenzi, and I'm going to be your host and moderator for this particular session. It's the COP15 session on desertification, the institutional powers to preserve biodiversity. So if it's a session you want to join, now's the time to come in, sit down, make yourself very comfortable. As we know, drylands account for 40%, more than 40% of the world's terrestrial surface area. What institutional and financial measures can be taken to avoid the negative impacts of growing desertification? Well, that's exactly what we intend to be exploring here on this panel right now. Joining me for the panel, I'll introduce all of the panelists first, then we'll bring them all out and dive straight into the conversation. So joining me for the panel, we'll have the president of COP15, Mr. Alain-Richard Donwahi. We'll also have from Regionopolis, an international initiative catalyzing lead solutions towards regenerative cities and communities, the founding partner and CEO, Diane Binder, and a specialist in public policy on water and biodiversity with a doctorate in ecology and training as a forestry engineer. We have the lead biodiversity from Secrétaire Général à la Plantification Écologique, Vincent Hulen. And finally, an agronomist, here we go, finally an agronomist specializing in tropical agronomy from the Executive Secretary of 4 per 1,000 initiative, a soil and food security and climate initiative, which was launched at COP21 in Paris, Paul Liu. Please give a warm round of applause for the panelists. Hello, hello. Welcome, one and all. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
Yeah. Good.
All right, I'm hoping you're going to be better after that, because that was like a good, you know. I'm like, are you scared? Did I make you nervous?
No, it's early afternoon, that's why.
Oh, it's early afternoon. It's okay. We're about to talk about a really exciting topic, so should get you all very, very energized. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Donwahi. For those of you who are less familiar with COP15, can you maybe give us a little bit more about your remit and about the work that you're tasked with doing?
Okay, when we talk about COP15, we should add Desertification COP. UNCCD COP, because you also have a COP15 for biodiversity. 30 years ago, the countries of the United Nations had a meeting and decided to launch the conventions, Rio conventions. And there were 3 conventions, one on climate, one on biodiversity, and one on the fight for desertification and land degradation. The climate COP is happening every year, except for the COVID year. That's why it's COP28 today. And the other COPs happen every 2 years. That's why we have COP15 for biodiversity and COP15 for desertification. But the convention, the parties of those conventions are all the same. It's more than 220 countries in the world. And 2 years ago, the Desertification COP, COP15, was held in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, in Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa. And Côte d'Ivoire has the mandate for 2 years. And I was elected as president for 2 years and a half, actually, to preside this COP. My work is political, it's financial advocacy, and also strategic advocacy. My role is to make sure that the countries, the parties, are putting in place the resolutions that they have decided in the convention. So I travel a lot, go around the world to meet the people, meet the communities, meet the authorities also, to make sure that we are in line with what we have decided to do. And I've tried also to focus on a few projects that are held by the COP Desertification It's the Great Green Wall project in Africa, 8,000 kilometers of green wall to be projected up to 2030. And also my advocacy for the implication of the private sector in the fight against land degradation, the presence of the youth, the participation of the youth and the women in the decision-making process for the COPs. So there's a lot to do. I cannot do everything in 2 years and a half, of course, but I want to make sure that what has been started will continue after I finish my mandate.
Fantastic. There's a very broad spectrum of work that you cover, and we'll be diving into some of the, talking about youth and some of the specific initiatives that you do as well. Diane, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here, and good afternoon, everyone. First I have a confession to make. I don't believe so much in institutional power. I hope I can still stay here on the panel.
We'll make a decision about that as we go.
I believe in people, which is the most important at the end of the day. For the past 20 years, I've worked within institutions, for institutions as a consultant, with institutions trying to get financing for public-private partnerships. So I think I have a pretty good overview of the challenges at stake. And it's hard, and we'll delve into that, I'm sure, a little later. So I've been working mostly on private sector developments, really using the private sector to catalyze a shared prosperity. My work has been mostly in Africa for over 15 years now. And I focused very much on the other topic, on environment, mostly on climate action and on the water sector. So I spent more than 10 years building public-private partnerships to give access to water services to populations in Africa. And 2 years ago, I founded Regionopolis. And this is exactly what it's doing. It's basically supporting what I call ecopreneurs, what a number of us call ecopreneurs, which are entrepreneurs working at the intersection of climate, biodiversity, and urban resilience, and community resilience. One of my programs was dedicated to the Great Green Wall. I'm sure we'll get more into details as well, which is the focus on the regenerative value chains. And then I have a program working on regenerative hospitality, which is using micro-hospitality to catalyze projects to regenerate the natural ecosystems and to regenerate local communities as well. And everything we do it through a regenerative mindset, which is very much long-term thinking, collaborative, holistic, bottom-up, and I'd be happy to talk more about it later. Thank you.
So Diane, you're going to be our holistic, collaborative thinker on the panel today. Vincent, can you tell us more about the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you. So I have something to confess to you. I believe a lot.
Is this the panel of confessions?
In institutional power, yeah. So my work now is to, I am in the General Secretary for Ecological Planification, which is a French typical service. We are linked to the Prime Minister here in France, and our job is to coordinate the action of every ministries on ecological transition. And my work is to do that on water, biodiversity, forests, etc. So it's not an easy task, but it's very important on my point of view, because we have to work with every ministry, every services, to be sure that everybody does what he has to do, what he said he will do, to achieve our goals, our international commitments, our national commitments, and what everybody needs to be done on ecological transition, carbon emission, biodiversity, circular economy, etc. We also have the task to follow the impact of these actions, and not only to see if everyone works, but also what is the impact of their action, and if we are going to achieve our goals or not. And if not, we also have to to find and to work with ministries to find new actions, to find new way to achieve these goals. So yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's necessary because we are facing an emergency, and everybody has to work in the same direction, and that's our work to do so.
So implementation, measurement, making sure that what you say you're going to do gets done, but also measuring the impact of the work that you're doing. Paul, welcome to the panel. Can you tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing with the 4 per 1,000 initiative?
Thank you, Lovelda. Hello to everybody. Well, we tried to have an easier task than all the people that talked before me. In fact, we are working at the global level to try to promote carbon sequestration in soil through proper agricultural practices, which seems to be a small work, but it's also the name of the initiative, 4 per 1,000, 4 per mil, 0.4%, that the quantity of carbon we should increase every year the carbon in the soil of the planet to offset, theoretically, the quantity of carbon that we are emitting in the atmosphere. So it's quite a doable things if we all work for that. And we are at the 4 per mil, we are one of the major multi-stakeholder partnership, just allying countries, international organization, scientific institution, farmers organization, NGOs, business, all together, because we need all the energy to make this work done.
Fantastic. Love the work that you're doing. It's very easy, the panel here is to focus on desertification and preserving biodiversity. Why, Mr. Donwahi, do we need institutional powers to be behind this goal? Can it not be, we're here at ChangeNOW, we've got so many different solution providers who are out there doing work. Why and what should the role of institutional powers be?
The role of institutional powers is on a legal point of view, or let's say on text. If you want to facilitate the work of the private sector, if you want to facilitate the work of any company in any country, you need to follow the laws of that country. So the institutional powers have to be able to facilitate the implementation of such decisions that are taken by nations. The convention that I preside is a convention of parties, of countries. But what is most important is the implementation on the grounds. And a lot of times the implementation cannot be done by institutions. It's done by communities. So you need a link between the institutions and the communities. When you look at the financing that is needed also, a lot of time it's public finance. It's public institutions who finance. So that's why you have to go through governments. But it's found to be not very effective anymore. So that's why I was saying that I promote the investment of the private sector. So the politicians, the authorities, the institutions have to understand and put a framework in which the private sector can evolve easily and be effective.
I can see both Paul and Diane behind you nodding their heads vehemently. Yes, exactly this. Paul, has that been your experience?
Yes, it's right. I mean, we need to define the rules, and the rules are the work for the institutions. But for this environment, need to be, I would say, implemented and work with the people in the field. You said correctly, Mr. President, that we need to work with the public sector, the private sector. We need to work with the farmers. We need to work with the civil society all together. That's what I said. All the energy need to be in the same direction. But without the institution, we have no framework. And it could be anywhere. We need to have the guide, and also the convention give us some guidelines in the direction where to go, agreeing among all the country to go in that direction. It maybe sometimes small steps, but they are very important steps.
So it's all about institutional powers being there to provide the framework for the transformation. Diane, I'm going to go to you because you're the one who's the most dubious about institutional powers. Do you agree that the role of institutional powers is around providing that framework for the sorts of collaborations that you do in your job, with your work?
Yeah, actually, I think it's even more than that. I think institutions are prescribers. They're prescribers with regulations and policies, so hence providing a framework. They're also prescribers in terms of financing, of priorities, of influence as well. So I think what's actually, I mean, to me is not working, is not so much institutions, is the system. So for example, as long as you have institutions called the local partners, beneficiaries, or recipients, that is not working. As long as you have institutions spending more money in administrating projects rather than on financing projects, this is not working. And as much you have institutions having difficulties channeling the funds that are available to the actual project on the ground, this is not working. But it's not institutions per se, it's actually the system. So the question is like, how do you change the system? And I believe that institutions have a leadership role to play in a number of things. In number one, raising awareness. I mean, I know I've known President Donwahi for a year, like since early in the mandate. No one knew what COP15, what the COP for biodiversity, for desertification was. So you made a really good job in like raising awareness on that topic, and this is very important. Very important role in fostering collaboration among the ecosystem, in making sure that the private sector can work with institutions, can work with startups, can work with NGOs, so that we can all move together in the same direction. And also a role in financing. Like I'm thinking more about the development financial institutions that actually have a role to play in maybe providing certain economic opportunities, certain alternatives to deforestation, to the loss of biodiversity, through the priority they're going to finance. So they can definitely have a leadership role. What I'm interested in is like, how do we make sure that institutions can play that role rather than being stuck in a system that is not working?
It feels wrong then not to let Vincent kind of jump in here and maybe give a slightly different perspective in terms of, you mentioned impact earlier, and as well as implementation, part of your role is measuring the impact of the work that you do. How easy or difficult is that to do?
No, it's not as easy as. The easier part is to measure the action. Has everyone done what he said he would do? But it's important, but it's not enough. What we need to do is, do we have the impact that we are expecting? The actions we're implementing, are they doing as good as we want on biodiversity preservation and restoration? That's the major point, and that's not as easy as it is. And I think that I agree with all my partners, but what I think is very important for institutions too is to decide the long-term goals. Where do we want to go together, and when? And so, if we say we have to protect 30% of natural areas, it's very important to say 30%. It's very important to say when, and then after that, how do we achieve that? And are we on the correct pace to do that? And that's also the role of institutional power to do so. And then after, we have to take action, and everyone has to act. Yeah.
So I think, Diane, did you have something to jump in and add there? No. I think it's very useful to look at where we are, what the challenges are, and we also know that between you, there are some incredibly powerful actions that you have been taking that's useful for us to know, at least we're moving in the right direction. So I'd like to start with you, Mr. Donwahi. Can you tell us a bit about some of the actions that you're taking with the UNCCD?
There are actions taken by the Secretariat, which is part of the United Nations organization. Those are big actions like big meetings, big conferences, organization of the International Forest Day, reforestation and everything. This is one part. What I think that what is important for me as president is the partnerships that are signed with companies like Regional Police, with Diane, for example. I signed partnership with a few startups and companies that can make things change on the ground. As I said, my role is institutional, you know, okay. Political, okay. But what else? What is important is to make the link between this private sector and institutions. I can open doors of a ministry. I can open doors of a presidency. But then what? Then I need people like Diane or others to bring solutions. And that's why I'm glad to be here at ChangeNOW, because we're talking about solutions. You know, that is what is most important, because the diagnostic has been said already. We know what's happening. We know that climate is changing. We know that we have heat waves. We have floods and everything. But what do we do? Do we have solutions? Yes, we have. Do we have the money? Do we have the finance? Yes, we have. So what do we do? So people like me have to shout. You know, I have to shout. I have to tell the governments that we're doing nothing. We have to wake up, you know, unless we want to disappear. So that's why I talk to the youth, because the youth is the future. You know, they understand what's going on. They know, they have the solutions. So I don't want them to be sitting in the back. I want them to be sitting in the front. So that's why I'm trying to have, for the next COP in Riyadh, the youth to have a seat. You know, okay, we're going to listen to presidents of all the countries. They're going to come, make a big speech, and then they fly and they go. So what else? That's what it is about now.
I love that you say that, like looking at who, it's a collaborative element. I'm here to set the framework, to open doors, but your role isn't necessarily to do the implementing, but to connect the implementers, to create the partnerships, to connect with youth, to get people moving forward in a forwardly direction. Vincent, as in the institutional space yourself, what have been some of the actions that you have seen have been particularly impactful?
Yeah, I agree with the fact that everybody has to work in the same direction, that we need everybody to work. But I think some actors have a very important role. Private companies have to, I agree with Alain-Richard, have to focus on solutions and to act on the field. We need people to do things. We need people to restore ecosystems. We need people to do the survey on the field, to count species, etc. We need these people. And the other actors we need are citizens, because citizens, they are the engine of change. If they want institutional power to move and to change and to transform something, the institutional power will move. If the citizens don't ask that, we will stay there and act as before.
So I'm going to come back to this topic of collaboration, because I'm hearing a lot in this discussion. It's not just one player. You know, we're here talking about institutional powers, and often we want to think we'll put regulation in place, we'll put legislation in place, that's going to fix the problem. But in and of itself, what seems to be coming up loud and very loudly is it's not just about that play. Paul, for you, with the work that you do, can you maybe give us some tangible examples of the impact that you've seen working with institutional powers?
Yes, we have some example, but just coming back on one very important thing. If you don't give the rule, if you don't give the environment, the people will not work. Because also, if the rules are changing too often, then you don't know in which direction you have to go. So we need collaboration, we need institution, but we need stability, not only political stability, but we need also geopolitical stability, which is not exactly what we what's happening in the world at the moment, and we need to understand that. So at the basis of all of that, you have people in the field, you have people in the streets, and those people are the ones who are making the job. So if you don't give them hope, which is another important element of the whole things, they will not do anything. So coming back to concrete action, what we try to promote is how we can develop categories of agriculture that will bring a better world. I mean, increasing biodiversity, increasing carbon in the soil, fighting climate change, fighting world food insecurity. And this is not easy, but we have the recipe. We know what to do. Then the last element after the hope is the will. And this is that is why we need political leader, we need people that show where we want to go. And if we have all of those elements, we will lead all the people to success. But at the moment, success are mainly in the field, local success, very seldomly national success, and more seldomly global success. So how we can reconcile the global expectation with the local work, maybe at the level and medial level, the national level. And this is the importance also of all the convention, because the parties are the country. So I try to book the loop.
I love hearing that it's that we can have local frameworks, but we're only going to get so far with a local framework, albeit they're quick and easy to implement. But it's the global frameworks that allow us to scale things up so that we're having the impact that we need to have on a longer term scale. We touched on collaboration a bit, and Diane, I really want to jump to you because you're sort of in the middle between, as the catalyst that's bringing different parties together. Can you maybe give us some examples of really tangible solutions that you've seen where institutional powers and organizations have come together to really make a dent?
Sure, I'll give you two examples. One where I learned many lessons, and the other one that is slightly easier. So the Great Green Wall. President, you have mentioned the Great Green Wall initiative that you've been supporting since the very beginning of your presidency. So the Great Green Wall is this initiative led by the African Union to initially fight desertification in the Sahel. So it spans 11 countries over 8,000 kilometers across the Sahel. When you think of fighting desertification, you can imagine the scale and the scope of all the programs that need to happen. So that requires collaboration. I started working on the Great Green Wall a few years ago on a number of different capacities. One of them was the publication of a report on the untapped potential of Great Green Wall value chains for the World Economic Forum. And then I started working on the value chains. Basically, and it's very interesting because to work on the value chains, it means if you want people not to cut down trees, you need to give them a reason not to, so that people, local communities can understand the potential of restoration, of land restoration, and the potential of markets, so that trees have an economic value. So last year, I launched the Alliance for the Great Green Wall in Davos. That was January 2023. And the whole idea was first, alone, there's nothing you can do. And no institution, no private sector organization, no bank, no development financial institution can actually do that. So let's get together, identifying people that can work at each step of the value chains, working with local communities on production, working with local SMEs who transform the product. And we're talking about Baobab and Shea and gum arabic and balanites. Those are extraordinary products. And then at the end of the chain, there are the off-takers, mostly in the cosmetic and the food industry. So you need to embark the private sector to give them a reason to source or to invest in the Sahel. Not easy. So basically, we got together a number of organizations and be okay, all together as a coalition of organizations, as an alliance, with the support of institutions like COP15, UNCCD, and a number of other institutions active in the field were like, okay, we're setting up these islands, we're going to raise funds. We want to raise a catalytic facility because we believe that institutions or institutional money can actually finance all those initiatives by unlocking opportunities, and then the private sector will come, right? Well, we didn't succeed. We didn't succeed to raise funds. We succeeded in like creating this coalition, in like embarking many actors. But the truth is like, it needs, I don't know if it's because of, I mean, the Sahel is obviously very complicated. Maybe because of the fragmentation of stakeholders, maybe because of the risk, real and perceived, maybe because of the natural lack of collaboration, or maybe because the lack of relevant tools from institutions. Like, I think no one knows how to finance an alliance of stakeholders. But that's what we need. So that's one example. And my other example, very, very quickly, is one about regenerative hospitality. So there, the approach I'm taking is very bottom-up, collaborative, holistic, systemic, you name it. But we start at a village level, using micro-hospitality, and we do that in Morocco, in the southern part of Morocco. And we use micro-hospitality to catalyze a number of initiatives at the village level, so that local community becomes autonomous after a couple of years. We've launched 15 initiatives, and on soil regeneration, on livelihoods, I mean, on memory. The way institutions can help, giving us a voice, helping us like catalyze those like blended capital that we actually need, and helping get us like a movement we want to replicate. So there is a very clear and easy role, I think, of institutions when it comes to supporting this collaborative approach.
You kind of bring me really nicely onto my next question, Diane, because often when we think of the role of institutional powers, we think legislation and regulation. And I'm kind of curious, beyond our default regulation, legislation, how else can institutional powers move tangible change? Vincent, maybe you can throw some other ideas out there that are beyond our normal default scope of how we think about the role of an institutional power.
Like I already said, I think that giving the vision and the travel, to have a long-term vision of what we have to do is very important too. You don't need the legislation or regulation like this. Paul is right when he says that people need to have stability, to know where they have to go, and on a long-term point of view. And if you say to people that in 2030, 2050, you will have to be there, and you will have to begin now, it's easier, and you don't need legislation for that. After that, you can also construct legislation for that, but I think it's just one of our tools. We also have financial initiative. We also have some scientific projects and to citizen commitments, etc. And so I think that one of our power is, as institutional actors, are the long-term vision. And if we don't have this long-term vision, I don't know who can. Maybe scientists, but it's on another point of view. So it's our role to do that.
So setting the vision. Paul, how have you found institutional powers? What unique ways have you found that they've been able to be really supportive in moving initiatives forward?
Well, one of the other important things for institutions is, you already said that, it's public awareness. This is important to bring the attention of all the public to some very specific and important question, showing also how complex it is to solve that. If you want to give, I can give you an example of such a very important things. We are focusing on soil health. Why focusing on soil health? It seems to be, well, something under our feet. We don't care much about that. But the problem is that if you have no soil, you have no agriculture, you have no biodiversity, but you need living soil. So this is soil with organic matter. That means carbon. How you bring the carbon in? So you see, you start with the small things, and then you start seeing that the problem is wider, broader, and it gives solution to most of the convention also that we are talking about. Climate change, you store carbon in the soil. Desertification, you restore soil and land. Biodiversity, you will bring the biodiversity in the soil and above the soil. Food security, you produce food and livings for the people. So a lot of solution can be bring with only one small things, but I don't think it's easy. I just said how you bring attention to very important things, 1, 2, 3, that make the society willing to move in one direction.
So education also being a really important element to it. Mr. Donwahi, I could see you nodding your head. And when we spoke in the lead up to this, you shared a number of additional mechanisms beyond legislation and regulation that you've been utilizing. Can you share a bit more about those now?
Yeah, you just talked about education. And Paul talked about information, you know, bringing awareness to the people. We've launched a few months ago the Desertification Fresque in Rome. And the Desertification Fresque that is present here at ChangeNOW is a card game that has been designed to inform people about what is desertification, the cause of desertification, the consequences of desertification, and the solutions to combat desertification. It's a card game. It's a ludic way, you know, easy way to understand the question of desertification. You see, so we launched that, and it's doing a good job today. People are interested. I'm having a lot of ambassadors that are appointed. You know, I appoint ambassadors now around the world, young ambassadors to promote that game, but at the same time to promote awareness. Because, you see, if you don't know about something, you are not going to be able to fight against or to change your mindset. So you need information before financing. We need to inform people. So that's what we're trying to do, and it's at an institutional level that I was able to do it, you know, with the help of private personalities, I mean people who are working with it, and it's working, you know, and also talking about education, what I propose to some ministers of education in their countries is to introduce the question of land degradation and desertification in the dans le cursus, you know, it's in English. How do you say? The curriculum of the education at school. So the young people, the children, will be aware. You know, it will become one of their own knowledge and nature, so they can make change later on. It's important to do that, you know. And what else? There are many other things that we can do, but we have to do it ourselves, you know. We need to change. There's one thing I wanted to talk about when you talked about the importance of institutions, you know. The institutions set the pace, the objectives. In a few months, we'll go to COP15 in Riyadh. It's going to be in Saudi Arabia. Somebody asked me, but why in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia? We know about oil and stuff, and then you are going to organize the next COP in Saudi Arabia. What I'm saying is Saudi Arabia is becoming the most important student, good student.
Good student.
Good student to promote environmental new mindset. Plus, they have the money. They are putting the finance where it's needed to be. Last year, we were at COP27 for climate COP in Egypt. That was in Egypt, yeah, in Sharm el-Sheikh. President Biden came and made a big declaration, very big declaration, saying that the United States are going to put up on the table $20 billion for the environment. $20 billion. At the same time, I was participating in the Middle East Green Initiative. It's an initiative that was launched by Saudi Arabia with many countries in Middle East, in Africa, and Asia, and some countries of Europe. Great Britain was present. At that initiative, Saudi Arabia announced $400 billion to be put in that initiative, and $900 billion in their own initiative in Saudi Arabia. That makes things change. So we have to be aware of that, and that's the importance of having institutions, leaders who have a vision, so they can, set the pace for what we need to be done. So that's what I wanted to say.
Pace and education. The amount of investment that's going behind it, thinking, you're absolutely right. When people don't know there's a problem, how do you expect them to get behind an issue when they don't understand the education? And where do we start that education? That is, there's definitely a role for institutional powers to play within that. What do we believe the role of science should be playing in shaping public policy? We talk about pace, we talk about education and moving faster. Paul, where should science be engaging with institutional powers to set policy? How should that arrangement be set up?
Give me 2 hours?
Oh, unfortunately,
okay.
You have less than 15 minutes.
No, I will start to be a little bit provocative, if you allow me. We are in a place, it's called ChangeNOW, okay? Let's dream about change. In answering your question, do you know that we have 3 conventions coming from Rio: desertification, biodiversity, climate change. Each of the convention has its own scientific policy instrument, okay? Everybody know IPCC, IPBES, SPI, right? None of those instruments have the same rule of functioning. They have their own rules, and they have their own independence. Talking about IPCC, they are very independent, and they are not allowed to discuss together, okay? If you want to change something, we all know now, and it's a critique that coming from the society, we are working in silos, problem by problem, while we know that solutions are holistic. Okay, how can we start with the UN, making those 3 conventions, coming from the same conference, work better together, having only maybe starting by a common report every year. Bring those scientific institutions, make a report for policymakers together every year, starting by that. After we can dream, we can merge all of them, we can merge all the convention, making only 1 COP every 2 years, which will be less costly, maybe. But maybe the politicians, they like to come and say, as you said, putting billions on the table. But it's only on the table at the moment. We need to go in the field. So that could help. And science is very important in the process because it gives us some information. But the problem is that most of the scientific, when you ask them a question, a politician is working for, is it white or is it black? And science comes, oh, it's gray. Okay, what can you do with that? How can you take a decision? You have to make a decision. So we need to help also science to understand, to answer the question correctly, to help the policymaker. Well, that's just a dream, so just wake up and come back to our conversation.
So I think it leads, it links back to something that was said earlier around stability and clarity of policy. Vincent, how do you find working with the scientific community in order to set what the goals are, the policies, legislations?
Yeah, we try to work a lot with scientists because we need them to tell us what are ahead of us. If I take the example of forests. We are trying to plant new trees because in France we had, like in other countries, we had enormous fires 2 years ago. We have some problems with dry, etc. So we have to plant new trees to renew our forests. But we need scientists to tell us which trees at which place, which species is adapted now and will be adapted in several years. And only scientists can give us this information. So yeah, we need them, and we also need them to work with companies to develop new methods, new tools to restore biodiversity. And I think that the last thing what we need with scientists are the way to follow our impact. I already said it's not easy to follow impact and to observe on the field if biodiversity is returning there, or if ecosystems are functioning too. So we also need them to look at that and tell us how to follow our impact in field.
So setting the pace is the role of the institutional powers, but scientists have a very critical role in helping to measure that and define exactly what great looks like.
Yeah.
We've spoken quite a bit, or touched quite a bit, on collaboration, and I want to jump to you, Diane. Some may say institutional powers, please don't bite my head off, guys, move a bit slowly. Just a tiny little bit slow. How do we create effective partnerships with institutional powers that increase impact and action?
Well, if any of you has the answer, I want to know it. I want to know the magic formula for it. No, more seriously, well, I heard about like institutions setting the pace. The way I see it is that what we need today is really to be able to think long-term, to think about intergenerational well-being, especially when we talk about biodiversity. It's not our generation, it's like, you know, the principle, the seventh generation principle. So we need to be able to think long-term and to act quickly, because we all have a sense of urgency. Institutions, despite the vision that is here, may tend to do the opposites, like think short-term and take some time to act. And when I say institutions, like, I mean, we've been talking about institutions since the beginning of the panel. Of course, there are a number of different types of institutions. There are the financial institutions, there are the more political institutions, so not everyone needs the same, but that's like a sense I get for the pace. How do we get everyone to work together? I think at the end of the day, it comes very much back to the mindsets, to like what mindset people need to have within institutions and mindset people need to have on the outside. Because don't get me wrong, it's very hard to be working within an institution. I've been there, I've tried, I've failed. It's difficult to make the system shift into a better direction. So I think we need to support those change makers from within as much as we need to support the change makers from the outside. And when I say a change of mindsets, I mean, I'm a lot into regeneration, so I will talk about a regenerative mindsets. Really thinking about radical listening to the needs of the partners, about empathy, about compassion, about collaboration, about how actually institutions can be positioned to serve the greater good in the short and in the long term. But really think about access to all within planet boundaries, you know, the donut economy philosophy. I mean, I think this is very, very core to it, but really shifting the mindsets to a regenerative mindset. And that comes, you were talking about science. To me, that comes from a mix of science and emotions. You know, that's what makes people move at the end of the day. It takes the brain and the guts and the emotions and the feeling, but we need to be aware, we need to have the tools, we need to have the knowledge, and we need to have the passion to drive change.
Radical listening, I love that. Mr. Donwahi, I can see you nodding And arguably, you've done an incredible amount of work in the time that you've been president of COP15. How have you been able to get things moving in a way that we haven't seen before?
Well, I'm glad to say to Paul that after 1 year of discussions, we were able last year to sign a joint convention between the 3 COPs. Yeah, joint convention with the presidents of the 3 COPs. So I talked to the president that was from Egypt, COP27 at the time, and the Chinese Minister of Environment for COP15, Biodiversity. And we were able to sign a joint statement. That was the first time in the history of the COPs that we decided to work together, the 3 COPs. And we gave our directions to the Secretariat so they can work together. So they are not in silos anymore, working, competitively. And also what I'm trying to have is to have agencies that will coordinate in each country, especially in mine, of course, but in others also, which coordinate the action around the environment. Not only climate, but also land degradation, desertification, and biodiversity. You see, in each country you have 10 ministries sometimes to talk about things that are related, like climate, like land degradation. You have Minister of Agriculture, you have the Ministry of Forests and Water Resources, you have the Ministry of Mining and Energy, you have the Ministry of Transportation, Tourism, and so forth and so forth. And we don't talk together to each other. Each one goes in his ministry and does his stuff. Doesn't talk to the other. We just meet for cabinet meeting every 2 weeks or every week. That's all. And when we meet in cabinet meetings, we talk about regulations and texts. That's all. So we need to work together at a national level, for the governments, at a regional level also, at a global level with the COPs. That's what I can say.
I could see Vincent nodding over there. Is it true? Are you that spread out?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, because you just explained why the General Secretary for Ecological Planification is so important here in France. Because you're right, we need every ministry and every services to work together. Yeah. About the speed of institutional action, I think that it's a bit slow because it's not easy to implement. It's not easy to. I will take just one example. In France, we want to create a new national park about wetlands. I don't think many people are against that. But when you have this decision, where do you create this park? And we are searching now, and it's not easy, and it's very long, and it's very slow because we don't have a special place for that. We don't have a place in France where everybody says, yeah, come and create a national park there. So it's slow because it's difficult, and because we have to deal with some inconsistency between public policies, private interests, etc. So yeah, I also would like to have the magical formula for that, but I think that the institutions have to work at the correct speed for people to understand, for people to be convinced they have to do something, and why and when. And perhaps it's a bit slow, but that's the real world.
I love hearing behind the scenes, because I think it's really easy when you're not part of an organization to sit from the outside, go and point fingers and say you should be moving faster, it should be easier. So being able to hear actually is much more complicated because of the nature of the remit and the history that you're working through to unravel things and bring them back together. That being said, Paul, a moment ago you said, oh, it should be great if all the scientists come together and we have one remit for COP. Well, that's been done, so what do you suggest we do next?
Great. Thank you. Well, I learned that it's on the way, which is good. I think we have to think another thing which is very important. It's a word that we have used a lot here, regenerative. Okay? While I was almost a kid, I was a little bit higher than a kid, but well, we were talking about sustainability. Our world was supposed to be sustainable for the kids in the future. We know that now sustainability is not enough. We need to be regenerative. So I love this enthusiasm. But we need to be careful about the word that we are using. A lot of people are using here in this place, regenerative agriculture. What does it mean? Do we have a definition for that? Not yet. We are working on it. But before going in the same direction, we need to speak the same language. Be careful about that, but keep the enthusiasm to be regenerative, because if we will not be regenerative in the near future, even now, there will be no future. And I don't like that, because I have kids and kids of my kids. So I like to be on that way.
We need to we need to have a common language across how we're speaking about things. I'm going to end with you, Mr. Donwahi. We've spoken about a lot in the time that we've sat here. If people are to leave this room and they only take one nugget with them as they leave this dialogue, what would you really want that to be that helps to propel us forward?
Change now.
That was easy.
Yeah, change now. We need to change our mindset. You know, do we want to continue living on this planet or not? You know, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want? Are we going to wait on the leaders? I'm part of the leaders. But are we going to wait on the leaders? I'm not saying to go and do a revolution. That's not what I'm saying. But the people, the communities need to be aware of their power to make the change. The youth needs to know about its power to make the change. So let's implement the change. Don't be shy. Let's implement the change.
Thank you so much. Change now. Who'd have thought those would be the two words we'd be left with today at a conference called Change Now? That brings us to the conclusion of this panel. We'll be back shortly for a second panel where we look at some innovators in the space of desertification and biodiversity. Please give my panelists a warm round of applause. My name's been Lovelda Vincenzi, and I'll see you shortly for the next session.